foxtrot. As a rebellious schoolboy, he was drawn more to the march and the military two-step.
I joined the army when I was 14 and 9 months, actually. I put my age on 4 years because I was big for my age. I went out to the front. I was wounded. I got an Italian decoration and then came out at the end of the war. That was in 1918. I had a dancing job offered me at the Empress Rooms in Kensington, and so that's how I started in the dancing world. I used to have to dance with any ladies who hadn't got partners.
Years of practice made perfect. In 1922, Victor became dance champion of the world. And from the Imperial Society of Teachers of Dance came an invitation to help codify the rules of ballroom dancing. With his wife, Dorothy, Victor opened a successful dance studio. And after recovering from pneumonia, in 1928, he published the best-selling Bible of the ballroom, called simply Modern Ballroom Dancing.
And then a short time after that, I had this idea about starting a band. I started that because it was impossible to get records to dance to. You could listen to a dozen records and you'd probably find only one side of one record was suitable for ballroom dancing. They were either played in the wrong tempo or they went out of tempo, or the emphasis was on the singer. So I put the idea up to one of the gramophone companies that they should make records specially for dancing.
The idea was a winner. Grandly titled the Victor Silvester Ballroom Orchestra, 5 musicians, later 8, would bring fame and fortune to their leader. By 1937, Victor was broadcasting on the BBC and performing at various dance venues. Punctilious as ever about dance tempos, Victor was somewhat less rigorous about keeping his accounts, as his grandson, Christopher Silvester, explains.
In the 1930s, there were various rackets that band leaders were involved in, plug money. You were bunged money to play certain pieces of music. And my grandfather was caught out by the taxman. I don't know quite how they cottoned on to what he was up to, but he'd been taking large sums of cash. And he got caught out, and in 1939, I think it was, he had to pay a swinging fine to the Inland Revenue. I think it was £30,000 in 1939. It was a vast sum of money. I think it goes to show the wealth that suddenly was available to people in show business in the 30s and 40s.
With very little musical training, Victor had succeeded in creating a unique sound. Oscar Grasso played the muted violin. Charlie Spinelli and later Edward Poggy Pogson played the clarinet and alto sax. Unusually, the band had 2 pianos, one of which was played by his arranger, Slim Wilson. Charlie Pude, now 96, played the other.
I met him some considerable number of years before the war, and that was only for doing odd things that one of the other pianists couldn't do. But I wasn't a complete member of the orchestra at all. It was only when Ernest Wilson dropped out to go into the RAF that Poggy found out that I was available, and he mentioned it to Victor, and I went in. And that was, well, I suppose, about 1940. When I first joined the band, I suddenly discovered they only played in 4 keys. E flat, D and D flat. And the old man wouldn't listen to anything. If it was in F or G, no, didn't want to know that, no. We used to laugh in a quiet way. We didn't let him know. But we used to say, he's so used to dancing and he feels rhythm through his feet. So when it comes to beating off the band, besides striking with his baton, his feet also went at the same time. Used to amuse us a bit. People used to say to me, "You must be a nice chap to work for." I said, "Well, to me, he's my governor." I said, "Yes, I don't have wry words with him. If we do have wry words, it's all forgotten in a few minutes." I said, "But that's not very often." we really became popular mainly because, well, the war helped considerably, because people wanted entertainment with all the grim things going on, and we filled the spot immediately.
Victor and the band were paid the princely sum of £60, and for that, the BBC was able to offer the public an hour's worth of entertainment with the dancing club.
We used to do live broadcasts from the Paris cinema. That was quite an event, because I can recall I was in the army at the time, and they used to insist that if I played two pianos in the studio, I must appear in uniform. It's unbelievable.
Whether in uniform or out of it, the BBC Dancing Club was a sensation. Tickets were really hard to come by, but for the young Dennis Cooper, age and social class were no barrier.
1943, when I was a child, I used to go from a 53 bus to go to the Paris studios during the war years. I couldn't get in because I was underage. But after turning up, David Biller came because he was the producer, and I said, why can't I get in? And the man on the Paris studios attendant said, because we can't break the rules for one child. And then they said together, well, provided you keep quiet, you can go in and watch the program. That's how it really all started in 1943.
If strict time music were a religion, then Dennis's radiogram would surely be its altar. And with signed photos and other memorabilia adorning every wall of every room in his London flat, there's no doubting his fervour.
I was told that if a child goes mad on a certain person, like I did, as he grows up, he gets uninterested. Well, I didn't. I kept to it. I don't know what happened. I used to buy him every year a birthday cake, and we got involved there. And I went to his office in Baker Street, which was 97 111. And because I couldn't always get him, was busy, somebody suggested go round to his Jewish museum. We went in there, we had to tea and everything. It was quite easy to go. If you met him, you'd be at ease right away. You know what he'd say to you if you was in his home? Relax. But I'll tell you what, if you've experienced a broadcast rehearsal with him, you'd never forget it. You know what he used to say to him? Boys, he said, we'll be on the air soon, he said. But he said, I want to remember one thing. I want a penetrating beat heard and the melody. I used to ask him for battens, banners. Ask him, well, I won't ask him for something that was unusual. Always cufflinks, VS cufflinks, he gave them. And they got J. Arthur Rank on them, and they were good, you know. But, you know, he never said no to anything. I've got to be careful because I don't want to break them. Yeah, that's the first record. First Columbia record. I think Victor gave me this, but I don't ever play it in case it gets broke, you know. Now, when we were talking about 1943, you remember? Here I am, you never believed going to the dancing club, but that was 1943. And I was that young. A lot of people say, you can't go in there. Why? I said, because you're not high class, you're not like them. And I said, rubbish. When I told Victor Silvester that on one occasion, you know what he said? I hate bloody class distinction. He said, we're all here to earn the crust, we're all here to earn a living. He said, I provide music for anybody who comes.
The BBC Dancing Club brought a touch of glamour to people's lives. Peggy Spencer, another legend in the dance world, enjoyed a long working relationship with Victor on both the radio and television dancing clubs. And like many other people, her interest was fired during the war.
In those days, in 1939, 40, 41, and right through to the 80s, ballroom dancing was the thing in this country. We excelled in ballroom dancing. Everybody through the war wanted this feeling of going into an escapism atmosphere, probably. and everybody wanted to learn to dance. Every Saturday night, everybody turned out in their best clothes and their new shoes and went dancing. There were ballets everywhere. So the whole country was alive with dance. I was not interested in dance in my young days. In my young days, after leaving Pitman's College, I wanted to be a politician. And it just happened to come my way to take up the teaching of dancing, of which I knew nothing and never danced. And I was learning from a book, from Victor Silvester's book and from Alex Moore's book, and was always just one page ahead of my pupils. But I discovered that this was the thing I loved, movement and dance and teaching people and relating to people, and it continued from there.
Forward, side, close, back to side, close again.
I've been a fan of Victor Silvester from around 1941, which was when his radio dancing club started. I was about 11 or 12 then.
Jeff Williams is the founding member of the Victor Silvester Appreciation Society.
I was fond of dance music of all kinds, but I thought, well, this is a new sound. I've not heard this sound before. It's different from all the other dance bands. There were 2 records issued every month at the time, and I bought every one of them when I could afford it.
Feet together everywhere, and get ready to begin with the right foot.
I can remember trying to do the steps at home, and in the People newspaper, Victor used to have a column, and he gave the steps, and there were little diagrams to follow. And of course, Victor wrote several books on ballroom dancing, which I used. Once I was at a college where they had a squash court, and I remember holding the book in front of me and trying to learn the steps of the slow foxtrot. His music was so popular at one time that you could hear it everywhere. It was played in the cinemas, it was played fairgrounds, football grounds, and sometimes I would just twiddle the knobs on the radio, and within a quarter of an hour I managed to get Victor somewhere on a foreign station or on the BBC. He was on all the time.
Victor's popularity brought many millions of people together. Literary critic Professor Terry Hawkes.
In a sense, Victor Silvester is the reason why I exist, because like millions of other people, my parents met at a dance, a public dance. And in any large city in the late 20s and through the 1930s and 40s, dance halls were the places where, given the decline of the church, where young people used to meet and form relationships and eventually, in those sober days, go on to get married and produce families. And that's how I came to be.
Terry grew up listening to the sounds of the ballroom orchestra. But
I hate the music of Victor Silvester. It's a music that is accompanying a male-dominated society. If you look at a picture of Victor Silvester demonstrating what he calls the hold, it's usually taken from showing his back, and you can't see the woman at all, just a little face peering above his massive shoulder. And this male takes the lead, as they say, and this anodyne music, which shows no trace of passion of any kind, was meant to accompany that.
Hello there, everyone, and greetings to our friends in all parts of the world.
He also represented Britishness, or rather more strictly Englishness, to people who were overseas.
So let's begin by calling Molly Bailey of Paramba, Madras, India.
I remember listening closely to Silvester after the war, and he was always referring to letters he'd had from Singapore and the North Pole, for aught I know.
Desney Grantham of Phoenix, Mauritius. Mario Frilla.
It's the opposite of everything I like in music. It's dead, it's anodyne, it's domesticated.
And enormously popular. Victor's records sold in their millions, whilst his performances at town halls and dance clubs still live in the memory of people who saw him. Trevor Elson is one.
I just left school. I was 17, and I wanted to socialise. I wanted to meet people. And, of course, what I was doing really was just kind of bed work. And the chap who I worked with, he said, why don't you go ballroom dancing? So I thought, well, yeah, but I can't dance. What do I do? And he gave me the name of a club, a dance club, and that was called Rogers and Lamont in Manchester. And I took myself off there one evening and joined. And it was wonderful right from the beginning, because I was dancing around. I was trying to dance. I was being taught to dance. And what was happening really, this music, it was in the background, and I didn't know who it was at the time. And I thought, this is lovely music. It's such easy music to follow. And like the dance teacher was saying, listen to the beat, listen to the beat. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And it's so easy. It was there to pick up. It was in my mind. And I thought, it's lovely, this music. And I did inquire. I said, by the way, who's playing the music on the record? And she said, oh, it's a person called Victor Silvester and his ballroom orchestra. And straight from there onwards, I just fell in love with it. I first went to a Victor Silvester dance. It was, I think, in 1955, and he played at the local Pally. It was the 11 June Pally. That's in Manchester. It was on a Friday evening. It was in September. It was a wonderful evening, a lovely atmosphere. There was 2 bands on, but of course the main band was Victor Silvester. And it was exciting to watch them arrive, get ready on the stage. And that's when I first actually met him, spoke to him. And he was a wonderful man.
Slow, slow, quick, quick, slow.
Come the mid-50s, and Victor, immaculately dressed in his trademark white tie and tails, transferred to the small screen. Now, to me as a viewer, he was the British Fred Astaire. But to Peggy Spencer, who collaborated with him, he was a close friend.
He was very, very elegant. He was very precise. He was a man without frills. He couldn't stand nonsense. Everything had to be absolutely clear-cut and precise for him.
Slow, slow, quick, quick, slow.
I had a reputation through the Imperial Society, and he was president of the Imperial Society. And when he had this program, he used to teach a little lesson. And he would teach one little figure. And so he used to come down to my studio in Penge and learn a little figure from me and learn how to teach it and what to teach. And so that's how we became great friends.
Hello and good evening, everyone. Well, for tonight's dancing lesson, Victor Silvester is going to tell us how to dance the Charleston.
I would be with him on the dance club program, doing other jobs as well, and usually I had an item in it, and we would put 3 or 4 dancers behind him to show the step.
One of those people was Janice Mallett, forced into dancing for health reasons.
I was round-shouldered, and my mother thought what a good idea to make me stand up straight when I was 14. So when I was 14, I was dragged off to a dance studio and started from then. And very soon was invited to go onto the dancing club.
Well, I see Victor's ready, so let's go over and join him.
If we couldn't do the step we were meant to be teaching, Victor and I, Peggy would give us the lesson, which is what happened when we did the Bossa Nova, because neither Victor or I had a clue. In those days, people really didn't do Latin American dancing. Peggy, of course, knew. The Sunday before we taught it, she drilled us through it like a sergeant major, really. We learned it, and then the next day we taught it. So Sunday we couldn't do it, and Monday we taught it live on television, which was terrifying, really. In the 50s, we were all decked out in this rather stiff net, layer upon layer, and it was covered in sequins. In fact, if you carried the dress in and you stood it down, it stood on its own. It was that stiff. As you put it down, it just stood there.
The show was a ratings phenomenon. Between TV, radio and records, Victor was a tempting target for comedians. Even the goons encountered him. In China.
I could see the sinister Oriental saxophonist Fred Fu Manchu playing strict tempo Chinese ballroom music.
Victor had become an icon of popular culture, and after 40 years of introducing generation after generation to the pleasures of the ballroom, in 1961 he was awarded an OBE.
Oh, he was very dignified, very sophisticated man. He always looked very smart, didn't he?
Straight and upright, and that's his attitude, wasn't it, as a conductor and the leader?
He was the dancing of our day.
He used to attend all the police balls in Preston, which was the in place, the in thing to do. It was very, very posh.
We went straight away to the Victor Silvester dancing lessons.
Which was great then because
nothing else to do.
You know, in that time it was very strict, and to be able to go dancing on a Sunday afternoon was terrific, you know, in the early 60s.
While society at large was becoming more relaxed, in his public persona at least, Victor remained a strict disciplinarian. Why? Well, one clue emerges from an incident in his earlier life. He wrote at some length about his experiences in the First World War. Particularly horrific was his involvement in a firing squad in 1917, shooting young deserters.
We marched to a quarry outside Etaples at first dawn. The victim was brought out from a shed and led struggling to a chair, to which he was then bound, and a white handkerchief placed over his heart was our target area. The tears were rolling down my cheeks as he went on attempting to free himself from the ropes attaching him to the chair. I aimed blindly. And when the gun smoke had cleared away, we were further horrified to see that although wounded, the intended victim was still alive. Still blindfolded, he was attempting to make a run for it, still strapped to the chair. The blood was running freely from a chest wound. An officer in charge stepped forward to put the finishing touch with a revolver held to the poor man's temple. He'd only once cried out, and that was when he shouted the one word, "Mother."
Certainly his experience of being on a firing squad, though at the time he thought that was right, did haunt him in later life. He's certainly told me at great length that he found it very difficult to deal with it as an old man.
What Victor Silvester experienced, like lots of young men in the war, was the unleashing of something animal and terrifying. And for Silvester, dance music became a way, in a sense, of taming those emotions. Slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. It's a taming, it's a restriction of animal passion.
How did you get the title, the drill sergeant of the ballroom? Would you say it applied? Is there any truth in it?
No, I'm always a stickler for discipline.
But even Victor was getting behind the times. Increasingly, his music became the preserve of the older generation, the ones who preferred to dance with others rather than by themselves. And although Victor attempted to modernize the orchestra, by the early 1970s, it was time to hand the baton over to his son. His granddaughter, Tara Silvester, grew up with two Victors to look up to.
To keep me quiet when I was a child, they used to give me postcards, and those postcards were sent in by people around the world for my grandfather's World Service programme. You may know that my grandfather's name is spelt Silvester. Well, no one could actually quite get the spelling of the name correct, and we received postcards from people all around the world to Victor Swanvester, Victor Silvester, Victor Silvester, incredible different names, but they knew who they were writing to. They loved the music. When I was old enough, literally, to be able to pick things up, my father used to take me to his band engagements from about the age of 7, and I was some kind of unpaid roadie, I suppose. I loved it. It was the most fantastic childhood.
In the summer of 1978, Victor Sr. got ready to go on his annual holiday to Aix-Belle in France.
I spoke to him a few days before we went on holiday, and he always went to the south of France. And he always used to send me a card as well. He used to send me cards every year. Anyway, this particular time, I said, Victor, I said, do me a favour. He said, what's that? I said, don't go away and die abroad. And the last words he said to me on the phone, he said, I won't unless the unforeseen happens.
A few days later, a distressed holidaymaker phoned the Silvester household from France.
I think this man was in a lot of shock, and the call came through to say, Victor Silvester's dead. And there was no, I'm terribly sorry, or can I speak to anybody? And I remember passing the telephone to my father, bearing in mind I was only 10 years old, and really in a state of shock. I didn't quite realise what this was all about, and it was only really seeing a 3-minute obituary with fantastic footage on the television that it struck me what he'd done for so many other people, and it really opened my eyes.
Victor had brought pleasure to people all around the world. With record sales of over 75 million, his was the best-selling dance band of all time. He left happy memories for many, but not just memories. For to this day, young and old continue to dance in the style that he helped to refine. In the words of his sign-off tune, don't say goodbye.
I think each day I do play Victor Silvester music, especially in my car, just for company. I am imagining I'm dancing.
We were asked at one stage, what are the most influential books of the 20th century? But it seemed to me that a book that had reached its 57th edition by the time its author died and sold over 1 million copies, that it deserved a mention. So with tongue only slightly in cheek, I nominated him as one of the most influential writers of the 20th century.
What Victor Silvester did was to leave us a great heritage of music that was danceable, of tempos that were set to suit the particular dance. All around the world you have people doing what was originally English ballroom dancing, what was originally Victor Silvester's style. I don't know, quite frankly, what we would have done without him.
Slow, Slow, Quick, Quick, Slow was presented by Angela Rippon and produced in Cardiff by Jeff Ballinger.